All right. All right. Let's we have now reached the hour of 6 o'clock. It's Tuesday, May 18th, 2021. The Woodland City Council is now in session. We are returning from a closed session from which there was no reportable action. So we'll proceed to the agenda for this evening. And we begin again with call to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Vega?
Present.
Councilmember Fernandez?
Present.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena?
Present.
Councilmember Landsberg?
Present.
Mayor Stallard?
Present.
Thank you.
Let me also mention that this meeting is being conducted pursuant to the governor's executive order via Zoom. And you're certainly welcome to participate in the meeting in any of a number of ways by either calling in or emailing or writing to us. And our clerk will be advising us if there is public input at any stage in the meeting. So take a look at the heading for this meeting online or on our agenda for information on how to participate on any item tonight. All right, that allows us to proceed now to the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, I think you should lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight, if you would. Thank you.
Thank you. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Anna.
You're welcome.
All right. Do we have any public comment on items otherwise on the agenda this evening?
I do have an email I would like to read, Mayor Stallard.
Please proceed.
Thank you. And this email and attachments were also sent to each of the council members. Greetings. The 113 signers as of May 11th, 2021 of this petition are concerned that the Spring Lake community will not have enough neighborhood schools when development is complete. There have been multiple amendments made to the Spring Lake specific plan, which has eliminated key components of neighborhood access to schools for our children. As a community, we have invested heavily in our infrastructure to provide safe access through our green belts to neighborhood schools, parks, and commerce. With 2 of 3 planned school sites covered in homes, a new research and technology park specific plan, draft paren, only providing language and lacking formal acceptance into the land use and zoning maps for a school, parentheses, school site, and a projected elementary age population of 1,328, we find our community at risk of losing the opportunity to have enough neighborhood schools to serve our children. We ask that our school board of trustees work with the City Council of Woodland to ensure the necessary allocation of land and formal inclusion in the land use and zoning maps of the Research and Technology Park specific plan to meet the needs of the elementary school children in our community, both the Spring Lake and Tech Park specific plans at completion. Thank you, Brian Coward.
Well, thank you, Madam Clerk. By the way, I did not receive a copy of that petition, so at some point I would like to have that in my box, please.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comment tonight? Items not on the agenda?
No.
All right, well, thank you. That takes us to communications and time for members of the council to share things that they're up to. Council Member Landsberg, we'd like to lead off tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Besides my regular duties, which consist of meetings, I would like the members of the council and the public to remember that June 1 through June 30th is, I know it's important, it's Bulky Waste Month. So you should be getting a certificate in the mail from Waste Management to give you a load of bulky waste to take to the dump. And the reason I bring that up, Mr. Mayor, is in our community, and especially in a surrounding rural area, see a lot of bulky waste that's being dumped by probably our community members, sofas and refrigerators and chairs. It's ridiculous. This is an opportunity to get rid of those things, take them down to the disposal site, and it doesn't cost you anything. You save $18 or $20. Take advantage of the certificate. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Landsberg. I do appreciate that. Next, let's go to Councilmember Garcia Cadena. Tanya?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to take this time to thank our county for so swiftly responding to the COVID vaccines for our youth. As soon as it was announced that our youth were eligible, we had vaccines happening at various locations throughout Woodland, including Woodland High School. So I really appreciate that. That made it easy for parents to get their students over there and get that done. I also wanted to, I went on a tour of our wastewater treatment facility. I highly recommend that to all council members if you haven't had a chance to do that. That was really wonderful. And also, I was able to enjoy the wonderful Cinco de Mayo celebration that we had downtown. And I don't know if other council members got to get down there, but it was really nice to see people out and enjoying themselves outside. And I don't know how much social distancing was happening, but they were outside. And so it was really a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia Cadena. Councilmember Fernandez. Are you muted, Vicky?
Thank you, Mayor Stallard. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Thank you so much. I just want to announce and congratulate some of our Public Works employees who have been recognized for their outstanding work in their field. So congratulations to Jeremy Cox, Shane Carlson, Elizabeth Del Toro, and Joey Gines. So thank you for the tremendous representation that you provide for the Public Works Department in the City of Woodland. And I'll have the opportunity, as my colleague mentioned, Tanya, I'll have the opportunity to go out and visit the water treatment plant on the 20th. So I look forward to that. Also, the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District has had their session to review the clean air funds that they will be dispersing next month and make their final have their final approval in June. So congratulations to the City of Woodland and Ken Lohman for putting in an application. We are looking to be awarded a grant for the Woodland Regional Park. So they'll be placing some bike racks out there at the regional park for community members to use. And it'll be hopefully a site that people can spare the air and ride their bikes and have a place to put those bicycles safely. Also to a fellow Woodlander, Maria Contreras-Trebel has applied for a couple of grants through the bike campaign. So again, reminding everyone that it is Bike Awareness Month. So she was awarded a grant to provide bicycle education to our second graders within Woodland Joint Unified, I believe. And she was awarded a grant for, I believe, 18 bicycles that they'll be able to use to help our second graders in our district learn how to ride a bike and I'm sure follow bike safety guidelines. And also a trishaw that will be used for seniors. I think currently it'll be only in Davis, but maybe something that the City of Woodland can look into getting. It's powered by a volunteer and a couple of seniors can sit on the trishaw and enjoy nature outdoors if they're not able to ride a bicycle themselves. So it gives them an opportunity to enjoy the nice fresh air. Also, through the Yolo Solano Air Quality Fund, farmers who may have equipment that is in need of, I guess, maybe dispersing or getting rid of to help our air quality. There is a grant that will be beginning, I believe, this next month called Farmers. So it is looking at getting equipment updated to help our environment. So just want to remind our fellow residents to take care of our planet and do that little or what as much as we can to provide alternative modes of transportation whenever we can within our day. So just a reminder that it is Bike Awareness Month. So maybe take some time to enjoy a bike ride. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Member Fernandez. And now Mayor Pro Tem Vega. Ira.
Thank you, Mayor Stallard. So aside from my assignments and attending the meetings, I did have the opportunity to go on a ride along this afternoon with Minnie Garcia on one of her calls and a case that she has been very diligently working on with the host team. It was a pleasure to see a lot of the things that I hear that Minnie does on a day-by-day basis, and to see our teams come together. You know, a lot of these cases that she is working with, there's with community members that are not on anybody's radar. So I really appreciate her persistence and the police department really at large for really taking time to address the needs of our community. So that was a joy. I also wanted to call out May's Mental Health Month. Gosh, I think mental health has been an issue for all of us, has touched us in one or many ways. So Mayor Stallard, you've mentioned this before. I think it's with how easy it is to be isolated. Take some time to talk to your neighbors, lend a hand, maybe call a friend that you haven't connected with. You don't know how much that call may make a difference. So I encourage all of us and our community members to do that. So that'll be all for me, Mayor Stallard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Vega. For myself, just a few items. I want to call attention to the fact that all of our landscape and lighting districts are going to be considered at our next council meeting, and I tend to move through them very quickly. If you have input, if you wish to direct to the council, this is the time to do it. Secondly, I want to mention that local resident Jim Lapsley, who's been very active in the Stroll Committee and other historic-oriented events, is giving a presentation on May 26th at 3 p.m. by Zoom on Woodland's geographical evolution, how the neighborhoods were added one by one or two by two to our community through the years. So anybody who's seeking information or the Zoom code, get a hold of me or the Yolo County Archives who are hosting the event. Third thing I want to mention is that on this past Saturday at 3 o'clock, Bob Bucagnani Field was officially dedicated. It was formerly Camarena 2, and we essentially did this to replace the Bob Bucagnani Field that's on the fairgrounds, which has been decommissioned at the request of the fairgrounds. So I want to thank Tony and Michaela Salmanini, who do so much for Little League. They've essentially put this commemoration together, and Mr. Bucagnani's family was there. He was a long time volunteer coach and just a major force in the league for Woodland. So it's nice to commemorate him in this way. And I appreciated the opportunity to thank all of the parents and coaches who do so much for our youth. Fourth item, I'm just going to say that we are past due to have a second pool in this community. And I've been somewhat passive about it for many years, but I'm not going to be passive about it going forward. It's way overdue in my view, way overdue. And we need to have a plan to get it done. And so I've already shared that feeling with the manager, and we're going to work on it. And I hope, council, that you will join with me in saying we have to get this done. Our community had 2 pools when we had 20,000 people. We now have 62 or 63,000 people, and we have one of those 2 pools. So it's overdue. It's time to get it done. We're talking budget tonight. We're talking allocation of capital funds. I hope we'll think seriously about that. Also, we're going to do a new version of the State of the City on Thursday, June 24th. It'll be a breakfast from 8 to 9:30. We're working on finalizing a location, but it should be a pretty special event. So I hope council members, all of you will put that on your calendars, as well anyone else in the community interested in participation. It will be an in-person event. For those not comfortable with in-person, it will be accessible by Zoom as well. All right, and now for the Mayor's Minute. I believe that one of the most important attributes of successful living is gratitude. With that in mind, I want to call attention to the fact that we are now in Public Works Week. This is the time each year when we pause to recognize and thank the many employees of our city who work hard to keep all of our systems functioning. With some 300 miles of city streets, 550 miles of sidewalks, plus curbs and gutters, and hundreds of miles of underground water lines, sewer lines, stormwater systems, water treatment and water delivery, with 3,000 streetlights and some 10,000 street signs. And all of these are very rough numbers. You get the idea that a network of dedicated, hardworking city folks who staff our Public Works Department are essential to maintaining the quality of life we have come to enjoy in Woodland. I want to congratulate and thank them for what they do, often well behind the scenes. I would like to particularly call out 4 people for special recognition, as has already been mentioned: Jeremy Cox, Shane Carlson, Elizabeth Del Toro, and Joey Gines, all of whom have received recent distinction. In Mr. Cox's case, he has been recognized as the top person in his field nationally and will be recognized at a conference in St. Louis later this summer. Bravo to you all, and thanks. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to cover the COVID report as part of my CM remarks this evening. So I'll start there. I have a couple other remarks as well. So on the COVID front, positive update around where we stand relative to our tier status. So due to positive performance last week relative to case rates, should we hold over the next week with similar numbers, we would be in a position, according to the county, by May 26th to transition to the yellow tier. So very positive and better than what I had presented at the May 4th council meeting. So it's quite possible we are trending towards a yellow status before the June 15th reopening date. Again, I think a lot of that is attributable to our community's dedication towards getting vaccinated. We have also heard that now 51% of Woodland residents have been vaccinated with at least the first shot. So I want to thank the community for doing that. We're actually ahead of the countywide average. So Woodland's performing a little bit above where the county stands as a whole. So again, want to thank the community for going out and getting vaccinated. As was mentioned with the expansion of the vaccination towards 12 plus, we've had very good success and a lot of strong participation amongst our community with that age group. So parents and guardians are doing well to get that age group and cohort vaccinated as well, which will serve us well as we transition into the summer and summer programming. Things like that. So want to continue to advertise. We do have some great opportunities coming up for vaccine clinics that are free and no appointments are required. So you can show up at the Bauer building this Wednesday from 5 to 7 for a vaccine. You can also go to La Superior, which is targeted this Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. For our Spanish-speaking community. So encourage folks to take advantage of those opportunities that are being provided through the county's vaccination process. Also, always want to remind the community that testing remains an important part of our progress towards reopening. So encourage folks to, where needed, to get access to testing, which is readily available now, which is different from where we were 6-8 months ago, where it was difficult to get access to testing. So take advantage of that. And then a lot of confusion around masking with the CDC's announcement last week. We did hear recently that the state will be following suit with similar guidance to the CDC, but not until June 15th. So until June 15th in the state of California, The masking guidance remains in effect. Remain under a status where masks are encouraged and required when out in the public. Continue to track that, but all positive, I think, for the most part around the COVID front. A couple other updates. Want to acknowledge that our summer programming is now in full motion. We have 150 kids that are signed up for our summer programming camps across the community this summer, which is a 10-week program. So we have 150 kids signed up. We also have 10 youth volunteers that are taking advantage of that. And that's on top of the other programming through our aquatics programs and boxing programs and things like that. So good participation there. We also did close last week the Summer at City Hall application period for high school students. We received 75 applicants this year, which is great. So we'll be supporting a cohort of 40 students through the Summer at City Hall program, which will launch. It's a 3-week program at the end of June, and we'll be working with the district to figure out how to provide that program potentially in a hybrid format this year to give those students an opportunity for some direct interaction with city staff as well as some council members. So look forward to more information on that. And then lastly, I want to close and thank the council members for acknowledging our public works staff. We truly do have a dedicated and talented public works staff. Appreciate Craig and his leadership across the organization that show up every day to ensure that our water is flowing the right direction. It's clean, healthy, it meets the ever rigorous state standards, which are probably the strictest in the world, probably for water quality. So it is no small feat that every day we enjoy not just clean water, but reliable water. So even in the context of one of the most severe droughts before us, we are privileged to have a water system that is reliable and sustainable and clean. So kudos to our public works staff. I want to echo those accolades. So then real quick check on the long range calendar coming up June 1st. In a couple weeks here, a couple items to point out. We've got 2 very significant roadway projects that are out to bid right now. The Gibson Road Improvement Project, which will take the final stage of the construction that has been occurring out there on Gibson from east all the way out to County Road 98, and do not just road rehab, but also improve the corridor for bikes, pedestrians, and better flow and overall safety on the corridor. So that project is scheduled to open next week, and we'll bring it back to the council for bid award, hopefully on June 1st. The other major project, which will be occurring, will be the East Main Street Improvement Project. So this is a long-standing project, largely funded again with grant funding that we were awarded, which will improve East Main Street from East Street to the I-5 interchange. Again, improving the roadway condition, improving circulation for bikes and pedestrians, providing ADA accessibility upgrades, as well as landscaping and beautification. So 2 significant projects that we have to look forward to and hope to have those to the council for award if we get successful and positive bids back. And then on the regular calendar on the 1st, I'm going to bring back the conversation around council district redistricting. So building off the conversation feedback we got from the council at the last meeting, we'll present some refined options for the council to consider so that we can move forward with that process over the course of the summer and be in a position to have the new maps adopted in time for the 2022 election. And then also want to point out on the agenda is an item for Spring Lake bonds. So this is another bond issuance for the next phase, hopefully one of the final phases of infrastructure bonds necessary to complete Spring Lake infrastructure, which will help fund roadway and interchange improvements associated with the Spring Lake development. That concludes my remarks. I'll give it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I'd like to clarify that I mentioned Jim Lapsley's talk. It's going to be May 26th. I may have misspoke. So it's coming up next week. All right, we'll move now to the consent calendar, items 4 through 14. Is there any item on the consent calendar that any member of the council should either remove or perhaps just to comment upon before we take action?
Mr. Mayor, I have a comment to make.
Please proceed.
And it's this, and it has been discussed with our city manager. I think I sent a copy to you. It has to do with the question of the fire department's quarterly report, capturing data regarding arson fires. I think our citizens, especially this year, we have such a dry year, that our public should be informed as to burn investigations, fire investigations, especially those that may be considered arson. I know that Chief Zane has responded that he's going to address that in his next quarterly report. So I just wanted to comment on that and let you know that we got a good response from Chief Zane to get that going.
Thank you, Councilmember Landsberg. Any additional comments or questions from anyone about our consent calendar? Again, this is items 4 through 14. If there's no, is there any public comment, Madam Clerk?
No.
If that's the case, we could proceed to a motion, please.
Thank you.
Landsberg will move it.
All right. We have a motion from Councilmember Landsberg, seconded by Councilmember Fernandez. Is that correct?
Yes, a second by Fernandez.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the consent calendar? There being none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Vega,
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena,
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg,
Aye.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the council, so that's adopted. That takes us to reports of the city manager. This is items 15 through 19 this evening. The first one is the presentation of the fiscal year 2021-22 proposed budget. And we're actually being asked to take action to formally receive the proposed budget. Is that a motion type item, or is that just a consensus of the council, Mr. Walsh?
I believe this would be a consensus of the council type item.
All right. Well, I think you can assume we'll receive it. Do you want to go ahead and present on it, Mr. Manager?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. That is correct. So tonight's item is simply an introduction of the proposed budget for next fiscal year, which will begin on July 1 and run through June 30 of 2022. So to allow the council and the community an opportunity to see the full proposed budget in context and before the council actually receives the final published budget for action and adoption at its June 15th meeting. The council on its calendar has an opportunity for the budget to be presented, an opportunity for council members to ask questions about what's being proposed in terms of additional funding recommendations or items that maybe you're not in agreement as a whole or consensus around whether it should be included with the budget next year. So I'll provide a brief overview, and I'm going to ask Evis Morales, our new finance officer. Want to introduce him for the first time in his new role. He's been with the city for 15 years now and was recently promoted to our new finance officer. He'll walk you through the slides this evening. I don't know if he's able to share screen yet, but what you'll be receiving this evening from staff will be a baseline budget update. So you've seen several times now ongoing update to our five-year forecast. And so we'll be presenting what that latest forecast looks like and how the proposed budget positions ourselves relative to the next 5 years. The focus will largely be around the general funds. There are other funds, of course, as Kim has mentioned in the past. We have over 100 different funds that are encapsulated into the budget, but the most important one that we track very closely, of course, is the general fund, which provides most of the discretionary funding available to the city. So we're going to touch a lot on the general fund this evening. And included in the budget is substantially a baseline budget that's consistent with what you've been operating under for the past few years, with cost of living increases built into it. But given some of the better than projected performance from a revenue standpoint and some cost saving measures, There's some flexibility relative to the general fund balance that allows us to make recommendations for one-time as well as recurring funding recommendations. So we'll walk through those with the council. And then followed by that are the measure E, F, and J spending plans. So these are the sales tax measures that the voters have entrusted to the city and the council to invest, in most cases associated with advisory measures that provide guidance, direction to the council as to how those sales tax dollars are to be invested. So walk through the spending plan for those, as well as some additional one-time allocations for next year from those funds. We will also touch on the capital budget. So the capital budget is independent of the general fund budget and is essentially a budget that tracks all of the capital projects the city itself performs through bidding and contracting. And it's a blend of a lot of different funds from general fund dollars to measure E, F, or J dollars often. But more often than not, it's blended with grant funds where we leverage our local dollars to pursue outside funding to get the capital projects built that we need. We'll also give an update on the American Rescue Plan dollars that the federal government has provided to the city. We've recently received guidance from the Department of Treasury around how those dollars are to be spent and invested. So we're digging through the over 200 pages of guidance that will be important for us as we bring back a framework for the full council. But we'll be positioning a subcommittee meeting for next week to re-engage with the mayor and the mayor pro tem around what that framework might look like, how the guidance provided by the Treasury will inform our options for investing those dollars, and then also how we can engage with the community around sort of validating where the investments that we are able to potentially make align with where the needs are in the community. And at the same time, align those opportunities in partnership with the school district or the county and other partners that have similar dollars flowing to their budgets. And then we'll close with a recap with tonight's presentation and then outline a calendar for the next meeting and what to expect moving forward before adoption of the budget. So I will pause there now, hand it over to Evis to walk the council through the baseline budget and our general fund recommendations for one time and ongoing augmentations to the budget, as well as the sales tax measures.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Today's presentation will start with the general fund baseline 5-year forecast. In this slide here, you will see that we have a 5-year forecast that does a 2-year look back, meaning the current year and the FY 19-20 unaudited actuals, but it also does a 4-year look forward, including the proposed budget year of FY 21-22. Next year, we're proposing revenues of anticipated revenues of 58.3 million with expenditures of 58.5, creating a small deficit of $203,000. However, that said, we are keeping an unreserved fund balance of 32.8% and keeping in line with the City Council's 20% reserve policy and an excess fund balance of $6.6 million. Our structural deficit or projected deficit does grow from about 1 million to 2.6 million over the 5-year forecast. Next, we will be discussing the FY 21-22 preliminary budget recommendations, and we will touch on the general fund first.
Let me just interrupt for a moment.
Sure.
You're going through numbers that you're very familiar with. We're not necessarily as familiar. So council members, if there's something you want him to repeat or slow down on, please don't hesitate to say it. Would you please repeat the deficit that you see over the 5-year forecast?
Sure. We're anticipating a structural deficit of about $1 million, climbing to about $2.6 million over the 5-year forecast. So it's this line right here. I don't know if you can see my pointer.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
So, and for next year, it's a small deficit of about 200,000 that we're not too concerned about, given that we have excess reserves in fund balance of over $6.6 million.
As you go forward, I see in the staff report that our general fund is jumping 12% over these 2 fiscal years. I'd appreciate your helping us understand why that increase is as high as it is, okay?
Sure.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Next, we're going to be speaking to the FY21-22 preliminary budget recommendations, starting off with the general fund first. We're going to be recommending one-time funding recommendations. And so this is a list of one-time based on no significant priority, but just the graded numbers to least greatest. For starters, we're going to be recommending 3 senior record specialists that are going to be working for PD. These folks will be handling night record keeping that Yucca currently does for us. We will realize savings in year 2 with the Yucca contract. And so this is a one-time funding request of a $318,000, but in year 2 we'll realize savings, and the net cost would be about $57,000. The next item is the
I'm sorry, you lost me there already. How is 3 positions a one-time funding thing? Can you walk through that?
Oh, sure. So the cost of $318,000 pays for 3 positions. However, in year 2, we're going to realize some savings from the Yucca contract, which will bring the cost down to about $57,000.
And why will we be saving from the Yucca contract?
So currently, Yucca provides this service for us. And so a part of our annual contract is that we pay Yucca for this service. They've been hinting at that we could take this work back from them. They really have a hard time with their resources keeping up with the record keeping. And so this is our opportunity to kind of take it back and realize some savings at a fraction of the cost.
And for the benefit of our citizens, Yucca is our communications agency that does dispatch for our police and fire and other public safety needs.
Correct.
Thank you.
The next item is our municipal services service center future roof replacement. We're proposing a contribution of $250,000 that will go into a reserve account. We understand that the roof replacement will be much more expensive than $250,000. Currently, building materials are too expensive to carry out a project like that. But for the meantime, we're just recommending to set aside $250,000 from the general fund in anticipation of a future project. The next item is a request of about $146,000. This is the COPS grant match for 3 police officers. I'm sorry. And so this aspect is actually vehicle and equipment. So this is a one-time cost. In the next slide, you'll see the reoccurring cost for the staff.
Is that COPS grant is a 2-year program, not a 3-year program?
That's what I understand from police. Yeah, it's a 2-year program of and they provide $125,000 every year of those 2 years.
Thank you.
At the 3rd year, we absorb the full cost of staff.
Okay.
Next item is contract services for building inspection and plan check. This is something that we go back to council with every fiscal year as part of Spring Lake Homes permits being pulled. There is typically a need for this allocation. So this year we've identified $100,000 in funding recommendations to augment that budget. For now, it might be less, it might be more, but it's typically about $100,000 every fiscal year at the very minimum. We are also recommending the continuation of the traffic calming program at a cost of $50,000. Code violation abatement funding, we're also recommending $50,000 for any abatement that involves code enforcement. Next item is a fire station alerting. This is at a cost of $40,000. And what this is kind of enhancing the system throughout the fire station facilities. So when there is an emergency that comes in through Yucca, for instance, all the facilities are equipped with appropriate equipment to alert all staff of an emergency. The next item is the police public relations consultant service. This is a one-time cost of $30,000. We currently have this service funded with one-time savings in the FY21 year. But what they do is they provide specific police-guided public relations. And so the hope is that they will train our staff to provide that service in the future. Temporary building inspection staff. This is another item that's been greatly needed in the past recent years with the build out on Spring Lake and all the home permits that have been pulled at a great number, more so than usual. The next item is special event funding at $25,000. And this is something that we've continued to fund over the past at least 5 years. This pays for our 4th of July celebration and any other events happening throughout town, including the downtown area.
Elvis, can you hold up a minute and let me ask our city manager a question? On special event funding, you know, the city is celebrating 150 years. This is like the first time in 150 years. Why not devote a little bit more funding to such a big deal as 150-year celebration? Seems kind of skimpy for the projects that we're taking on with this 150. My recommendation is that we look at that number, Mr. City Manager, and budget some more money in that area.
Certainly, yeah, we'll track that. In fact, at tomorrow's committee meeting, we'll get a budget update. You know, we do have $25,000 in our current budget, of which a large portion of that is being set aside for the 150. So we're currently looking at, you know, investing a large portion of this new allocation as well as the current year allocation. But we can certainly, you know, look at that and bring back as part of the final budget increased amount. And I'll also, you know, mention that, you know, this isn't our only bite of the apple. If there's a project or part of the celebration that we really feel is a priority, we can always come back to the council and request an additional augmentation if necessary. But we'll try to get as close as accurate as possible to where we think we'll be in spending for the celebration.
Okay, continue on, please.
Sure. The next item is abandoned RV towing at $20,000. This is a pilot program carried out by our police department. This year, it was funded by that same amount, and we're hoping to continue the pilot project into FY22. There seems to be a good success rate with the program, so we're giving it a second year in terms of testing the outcomes.
Okay.
At $5,000, our CSD department, our community services department, is requesting $5,000 for equipment rental to remove some tree stumps. And lastly, our community services department is also requesting $3,000 in supplies for our Rocksteady boxing program that is geared towards senior citizens with Parkinson's disease. Last but not least, our fire station set aside. In FY20, we had set aside $1 million. We were intended to set aside $1 million to fund a future fire station relocation, Fire Station 3. Due to the COVID pandemic, we kind of put that aside for now, but we're hoping to bring it back now in the FY22 year, as this is kind of part of our funding plan for the future relocation of this fire station.
Mayor Shelton, I have a question. I do have a question. First of all, congratulations on your new role. It's great to see you on here. On the fire station set aside, so is the total dollar allocation for the fire station, if this is approved, $1 million? Am I understanding that correctly?
So this is just a set aside. I'm sure the cost will be between $8 to $12 million. So we're putting money aside as best as we can whenever we see the opportunity. And we are going to be working to identify other funding sources to fund the entire cost. But for now,
right now, it would be only 1 million total.
Yes,
towards
but we have also already invested about another $1 million, which was geared towards the land purchase.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mayor Stellard, I have a question.
Please proceed, Tanya.
Thank you. And thank you, Elvis. Can you please give me some details on the traffic calming program? What specifically is covered under that?
So this is just a continuation of it. And I would have to rely on our community service, our community development staff to kind of break down what has actually happened in terms of what streets have been addressed versus what streets are planned to be addressed in FY22 year.
Yeah, I can fill in there. So several years back, the council allocated $100,000 towards implementing a traffic calming program citywide. Part of that process, we updated our criteria for streets to comply with both active and passive traffic calming. So annually, we've been coming back as we've started to make improvements on qualifying streets in partnership with various streets and supplementing funding. For example, recently the council approved traffic calming on Buena Tierra, Casa Linda, I think Woodland Avenue as well. In prior years, as part of this year's allocation of projects, we're pursuing traffic calming on Bartlett, Pendergast, as well as West Street. And so rolling forward, as we get requests that trigger the need for us to consider and present to council investments to implement passive or active measures, these dollars then would be set aside to pay for those improvements. We will also use them on occasion to bring in a third-party consultant to help evaluate more complicated corridors, particularly in our case this year, we've brought in a traffic consultant to look at the West Street corridor from city limit line south up to El Dorado. So this is simply an acknowledgement that we have additional need in the community to focus on traffic calming. Let's set aside $50,000 so that we're in a position to move forward with recommended measures.
Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Any additional questions on this page? I'm going to just ask the question, why are we setting aside money for the fire station when we haven't got enough money yet to build the pool? The reason I ask the question is because, when I came in 2011, we needed the pool. Since then, we now need another fire station. Also, we've had an expensive study for the library, for expensive library. How are we ever going to get any of these things done if we don't put the money in one basket, get one thing done and move on to another? Because costs get more expensive all the time. The pool we would want to build now, it's going to cost us probably a third more than it would have we'd built it 4 or 5 years ago. So why are we putting these small amounts in multiple baskets rather than trying to get one capital project done and so we could move on to the next one?
Yeah, good question, Mr. Mayor. And as we go through the measure spending plan, we'll touch on various opportunities for us to set aside similar amounts of money towards the pool. I think different than prior conversations with the council, I think we've got an opportunity to not make these mutually exclusive. I think there's opportunities to advance and set aside necessary funding to get both of these projects built. So over the course, of this budget year, it's our intention to actually put together spending plans to advance both of these projects on a timeline. So the infrastructure subcommittee, which I think you and Mayor Pro Tem Vega serve on, will have a very thorough discussion around this topic next week. And then ultimately, it's our goal as part of this budget year to put together and bring forward to council proposed implementation plans that would include funding strategies to execute both of these projects.
I hope so. Thank you.
Our next slide, again, touches on the general fund, but these are recurring funding recommendations. So this is the first item is the second part of the COPS grant, which pays for personnel. So this is $429,841. This is the match of year 1 of 2. And so it is a very expensive proposition, but greatly needed.
Are you telling us that the total cost is 860,000?
No, so it's approximately about, what, about 600,000? The cost, so the city share is going to be 429,000. The grant match is 125,000 per year. That's for 3 officers.
So I'm still confused. Why did we have the 129,000 number and the 429,000 number?
So you're referring to this, the
$146,000.
$146. So that includes a patrol vehicle and one-time cost for equipment.
Oh, so that's not personnel at all.
No. That's vehicle and equipment for year 1. So those are one-time costs.
That's not part of the grant at all. The grant is only salaries and benefits.
Salaries, correct. Yes.
So to get 3 officers in the first year, move to the next slide, we're still paying 449,000 or something like that, 429,000.
Correct. That's the personnel match.
In the second year, it'll be the full 600,000.
So the second year would be the 429,000 plus any increases to personnel, and we would still get the 125K match.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so
the total grant is $250,000 essentially.
Yes.
Correct.
It's gotten much skinnier than it used to be.
Yeah.
In the past, was much more generous from the feds.
The second item there, what you see is a county mental health clinician. We currently share a resource with all the cities in Yolo County. All the cities do participate, and so we're recommending that we pay our share, which is $60,000. This would put us in line with all the cities that share this resource, and it would be a great asset to our police department to allow them to continue on different calls while this professional deals with folks with mental issues.
Mm-hmm.
The next item is the 3 record specialists again. So the first, like similar to the COPS grant, what you saw in the first slide was, here, I'll go back to it just so you can see it again. What you saw was the cost of $318,000 and 85 cents. And so that's how we absorb these people in the first year. And on an ongoing basis, what you see here is the cost of about $53,000. I had said it was $57,000, but it is actually $53,000 on an ongoing basis. That's including the net of savings. The next item is Woodland Regional Park. This $25,000 would pay for a temporary position and some maintenance out there. Next is equipment replacement for police at a cost of $8,660. Next item is the continued use of 2 older police vehicles. And so what $5,000 pays for is just the annual maintenance on these 2 vehicles. And lastly, for economic development, we're suggesting or recommending $2,000, which is the increase in the regional membership. So total recurring funding recommendations is going to be at a cost of $584,474 in the general fund. And so here's the 5-year forecast once again, but this time it does include the funding recommendations. You will notice that our for FY22, the deficit number does jump up to $788,000. This includes the recurring costs. That structural deficit does go from 1.6 million to about 3.2 million over the 5-year forecast. And so I do have to say that in the staff report, it mentioned going from 1.1 million to 2.6, but that was in reference to the baseline budget. So that's a correction to the staff report. In the baseline year, you will see here that we do include the $1 million in the one-time general fund recommendation, as well as the fire station, restoring of the fire station set aside. which brings us to approximately 27.7 in an ending unreserved fund balance. Keeps the 20%, keeps with the 20% city council policy for the reserve, and creates keeps a $3.9 million excess fund balance. And I'll just wait in case anybody has any questions. I know I kind of spoke through this kind of fast.
Any questions, anyone? Please proceed, Avis.
Sure. So now we're moving on to the other funds and those budget recommendations. So one-time refunding recommendations, starting with Measure J. As discussed previously this year, in other council meetings, it was recommended that we fund the Community College Promise Program for 2 years. So the first item represents the first year of 2 at $100,000. The next item is the Woodland Girls Fast Pitch at $8,000. And what this pays for is basically field reservation and porta potties at Douglas Middle School. The next item is the Facilities Replacement Fund. We're suggesting or recommending that City Council approve $124,255. This would pay for various improvements and facility upgrades throughout throughout all City Hall facilities. Water Enterprise, Environmental Services, Small Project Funding. We're recommending $4,000 and $4,055. This would basically pay for the workshops that have to do with water-wise landscaping. Sewer Enterprise, Smart Hole covers for sewer lines. So we're suggesting $12,000 to pay for smart covers. This would allow our PW, our public works staff, to better monitor flow and blockages in our sewer lines. I'll continue to the next slide, which talks to one-time funding recommendations. In terms of one-time funding recommendations, Measure F, we're suggesting or recommending that council approve $175,018 for park projects. This money has been made available to the city via savings from debt service that was programmed in the prior year, but not needed. So this became a reserve that can now be used for park projects. The next item is assistance to firefighters grant match funds. We're recommending $45,000 in required 10% matching funds for the purchase of radios for our fire department. The next item is police equipment replacement. This item is for $3,200. And lastly, our sidewalk, curb, and gutter repair for $50,000.
Avis, we normally fund curb cuts and things like that through the Community Development Block Grant. Is this $50,000 in addition to the money we set aside from that fund?
Yes. So what this will do is this will repair uneven pavement or uneven sidewalks, whereas the CDBG funded program pays for ADA improvements at corners of streets and intersections.
Thank you.
Lastly, you'll see that there is a star.
I have a question for you. So this police equipment replacement, there was another line item on one of your previous slides is that for the same equipment replacement, just pulled from different fund types?
So what you saw in the other slide from the general fund was the equipment replacement, which was basically specific items such as phones that police needs on an ongoing annual basis. And so it's basically a replacement plan, an annual replacement plan, whereas this item here is a radar paid for out of Measure F.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question before I go on, please.
Mm-hmm.
That $175,000 for Parks project,
Yes.
can you elaborate on what kind of project we're referring to? And the reason I asked that question, we have a lot of need in our community to complete the projects. For example, the skate park, Woodland, the girls' fast pitch complex. You know, tell me what this 175 could be earmarked for.
Sure. So typically what happens with these type of funds or Measure F funds that are excess from debt service, not needed for debt service, is that they'll be taken to the Parks Commission based on the funding plan that has been developed over the years in terms of our priority and need. And so the Parks Commission will receive a staff recommendation, and that's how these projects will be identified. I can tell you that this year, the funds that were identified are being used for park bathroom replacement or upgrades. And I'm not too sure that the $175,000 has been identified in terms of projects just yet, but it is being recommended as an appropriation for next year. So the discussion could be had with the Parks Commission.
And I'll just, as we get to the Measure F spending plan later on in the presentation, you'll see that this isn't the only allocation of funding that's going towards park maintenance, park improvements. This is simply a recommendation to take excess debt service payments that were not made and take that fund balance and put it towards additional park improvements.
Davis?
Sure. So lastly, you'll see that there's a star at the bottom, and we're recommending that we reserve $575,000 for future rehab of the city's parking lot behind the Hotel Woodland. In terms of recurring funding recommendations, we are suggesting or recommending that in Measure J, we allocate $16,000 for a temporary position to assist with pool maintenance. And in terms of library, we're looking to reclassify a position at a cost of $12,000. So the total recurring increase in Measure J would be at a $28,000 cost. For water enterprise, we are looking to replace a mini excavator. And so for which we already have funding for. So this basically would cover the cost of maintenance and replacement at a future date, whenever that replacement is needed. Water enterprise is also we're also recommending that we pay for testing of the generator transfer switch. This is the switch that kicks on or allows the generators in our city facilities to kick on when there is a power failure. So this is the testing aspect of it. In sewer enterprise, we are recommending $14,000 for manhole repair and maintenance materials. This is just an expansion of a current effort that is happening with Public Works at the moment. You will also see the generator transfer switch testing for facilities again. This would be for sewer facilities. Next is the upgrade to a maintenance worker 1-2 to a 3-4 at a cost of $7,073. And this is just basically an upgrade to a classification based on the demands of the workload out in Public Works. And lastly, for sewer enterprise, you will see the smart manhole covers. But this time it's basically for the maintenance and monitoring of the manhole covers themselves. So this is at a cost of $1,221. In storm drain, you will see that same upgrade to the maintenance worker position from 1-2 to 3-4. So this is a position that's funded by both sewer enterprise and the storm drain fund.
And I'll just add, both of those maintenance worker position upgrades are a direct result of what we're finding with new state mandates to, test and have higher certifications for performing the duties necessary to have a compliant stormwater as well as sewer system. We need employees that have higher classification and skill sets. So we've had a very difficult time keeping these positions filled and meeting those qualifications. So recommending, upgrading those 2 positions. I'll also add, you might know that the generator transfer switch item shows up twice here. So last year with some of these PSP events that we experienced with the power shutoffs, we noted some vulnerabilities where transferring from direct current power from PG&E's distribution system to our generators, we had some significant vulnerabilities in some of our facilities. And so this transfer switch will allow us to test those generators and make sure that we don't have an interruption should there be a power shutoff.
Mayor Stallard, I have a question.
Please proceed, Tanya.
When I'm looking at this, the maintenance worker from a 1 to a 2, does that say a 3 to a 5?
I'm sorry, you're right. It should have been a 3 to, it should have been a 3-4.
Okay, and same on the
Yes, correct.
the one below. Okay, thank you.
Next is the presentation of the spending plan, starting with Measure E. So Measure E expired in FY 2019-20, and it did fund over the life of the measure road rehab projects. It funded communities, the Community and Senior Center Phase 2, the sports park, and improvement to parks and recreation facilities, library, city hall, and the opera house. That measure stopped receiving revenues in terms of tax revenue and that same year. However, we've continued to receive loan payback, and so in a while back, we did lend the Road Development Fund $4 million. Of that money, $2.5 million is expected this year in terms of a payback, which we are funding road projects with. Next year, we're programming the remainder of that, which is 1.5, which will also fund road projects. $1 million towards the Gibson Road Bicycle Pedestrian Mobility Project, and $500,000 for the East Main Improvement Project. That said, Measure E will continue to carry a $9.8 million loan to the Park Development Fund. And what this is a loan that was used to pay for the debt service for the Community and Senior Center and also the sports park. This was a loan to the Park Development Fund. So as the Park Development Fund continues to pay for debt service on those bonds will be paid off in fiscal year 25-26. At that time, that revenue source will become available and we'll be able to repay Measure E, and repayments will be available for future projects. Anybody have any questions?
I noticed this is item 16 on the agenda, and you're asking us to adopt a resolution approving the updated Measure E spending plan. Should we take that up after discussion at this time? Okay, Council, you understand we're going to be taking action to approve this. So if there are questions, this is the time to ask them, after which we'll consider a motion.
Well, I can have a question, Mr. Mayor. So looking at the Measure E for road rehabilitation, and perhaps Craig can chime in on this, is there a difference between road rehabilitation and road maintenance? And the question is, can Measure E be used for maintenance?
Mr. Manager, do you want to speak or have Craig try to address that?
Well, I think simple answer is, the council has a fair amount of discretion over Measure E. There were, again, advisory measures with Measure E that allocated a certain percentage of the funding towards road projects. And that was road rehab, which, I would argue there's plenty of flexibility within that if, the council decided to set aside some Measure E funding to help pay for our annual sort of maintenance of pothole repairs and smaller projects, as opposed to helping to offset or leverage state grant funding that we've primarily done. But we do use Measure E, and we have used Measure E as part of our annual road resurfacing project. So if you recall back, we were rotating around the community and doing sort of neighborhood scale resurfacing projects. Large portion of that was Measure E funded. And as part of those projects, we would go through in advance of the slurry seal, and our crews would do spot repairs or repair trenches where sewer and water laterals were needing to be upgraded. So, short answer to the short answer is yes, you have the flexibility to use Measure E towards that. If there's a need to supplement our current gas tax funding that we use, primarily to fund our road crews.
Well, as you know, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Hyatt, that's been one of my peeves over the last couple of years is the state of and the condition of some of our major roads, streets, artery streets like Matmore Road, and especially right now, Cross Street between West and College Street are in terrible condition, as well as others. I just wonder, if we can allocate some of these funds to fix those roads, at least on a temporary basis, the last a year or two, is better than the conditions they're in now.
Council Member Landsberg, you are aware that we recently were informed that SACOG is putting $5 million towards the Matmore repairs.
Yeah, and that's a question that I would have down the road. For example, if we allocated, say, $2.5 million for a big project, let's just identify Matmore Road, and later we got additional grant funding, could that be reallocated somewhere else? No.
Projects are specific. It's a competitive process, and it was a real coup for Woodland to come through with $5 million. It's not just Matmore Road, it's also GUM at Matmore. So it's a major project, and it's going to be, specs will be developed, and it will be a bid project, and it'll be rehabbed at one time. I would just respectfully suggest you chat with Brent Meyer. Sometimes it's impossible to repair a pothole when the basic road bed is no longer functional, because the pothole repair will pop out for the first truck that drives over it.
I agree, Mr. Mayor, but that's a maintenance issue, and that's what I'm addressing, as opposed to total rehabilitation and our maintenance program. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else on the council wish to comment on this, or are we ready to proceed with a motion?
This is for number 16.
This is item 16. Yes.
I'll move it.
Well, before we,
Councilmember. Yes, too. I need to comment.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Council Member Fernandez, please.
Thank you, Marcelo. I just wanted to clarify on the Measure E, the $9.8 million loan. Repayment will be available for future projects. Do we have a designated future projects, or is it all tentative still for the 2025 payoff of that loan?
So we have our CEIP project list goes through FY 24-25. So I would say at
you
this
might
moment,
find your acronym there, Avis, for everybody.
I'm sorry, our capital improvement program goes through fiscal year 24-25. So at this point, I would tell you that we do not have a project list, but we can start probably developing one in the next few years in anticipation of this loan repayment.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Councilman Landsberg has offered a motion to adopt the recommended spending plan for Measure E as presented tonight. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, I'll take the Mayor Pro Tem's second there. Thank you, all of you. So we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on Measure E spending plan?
And Mayor, just to confirm, there was no public comment from the city clerk on that.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. I appreciate the help. All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. Yes, and no public comment. And I'm sorry, who made the second, Mayor Steller?
Mayor Pro Tem Vega.
Okay,
We
thank
had
you.
multiple seconds, but I acknowledged her.
Thank you. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Vega,
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena,
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg,
Aye.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. So we now move on to item 17, the Measure F spending plan. Avis, are you continuing?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Measure F. So I'll start with the first slide, which basically summarizes the funding of Measure F. So Measure F continues the baseline funding support to priority programming, which includes parks at a tune of about $1.25 million per year, which pays for debt service and parks projects, roads at about $2.5 million per year, which pays for road projects, and public safety at about $1.5 million for staffing and supplies. And lastly, economic development at about $227,500 for staffing and supplies as well. In the FY 21/22 fiscal year, we are recommending new funding for the Assistance to Firefighter Grant Match Funds, again, for the radios that we discussed earlier. This also requests funding for police equipment, and this goes back to the police scanner that we also mentioned earlier. And again, the sidewalk, curb, and gutter repair, $50,000 that we spoke of earlier as well. The Measure F spending plan also uses existing reserves to fund additional parks projects. And so this speaks to the $175,018 that we spoke of earlier, and also reserves $575,000 in Measure F funding for a future rehabilitation of the city's parking lot behind the Hotel Woodland. Next, I'll show you what this spending plan looks like. I just spoke to the points of FY 21/22. We're anticipating revenues of about $6.6 million. Of that revenue, we expect to spend $1.25 million for parks related items, including $1.2 million in debt service, $15,000 for Clark Field maintenance, and about $52,000 for other park projects. For roads, we've identified $2.5 million to pay for Measure F planning and management. This pays for staff time to plan out the implementation of these road projects. $750,000 augments the maintenance of our public works crew and maintenance of roads and the staff effort of our public roads crew. $400,000 would be recommended for the Gibson Road West to East project. $210,000 Gibson Road again from West to County Road 98. And there's a $7,000 recommendation for local roadway safety plan. And I think that that's possibly a grant match is what I understand. And lastly, we're recommending an allocation of about $1.1 million for our annual pavement maintenance program for a total of $2.5 million.
So that 1.1 million annual pavement maintenance, we're not moving in quadrants anymore around the city. Is this just all over the city, that amount of money?
I don't know the specifics in terms of what streets or arteries or roads are planned for FY 21/22, but it is an ongoing program. And if you notice throughout the 5-year forecast of this plan, you'll see that the same allocation reoccurs in at least a few years, and continues through FY 25/26 and further out. So it is an ongoing annual program. And I think our community development department engineering staff would be better equipped to answer which specific roads or roadway projects are being addressed each year.
Thank you.
Moving on, public safety. We do pay for fire staffing, which includes a fire marshal and police chief at a cost of $594,000. Police staffing includes 4 police officers, some other record specialists and community services officers at a cost of $874,000 for a total cost of $1.5 million for both fire and police. In economic development, again, that amount is $227,000 for economic development staff and supplies. There is an overhead component to Measure F, which is at a cost of about $102,000 for total expenditures of about $5.5 million for FY22. What we are suggesting are the items that we spoke of earlier, which is the parks projects coming from reserve at a cost of $175,000, $18. If you notice here below, this is the reserve that had been built up for parks projects reserve. In FY21, we allocated $729,000 of that reserve. And so this is the last of it here that we're going to be allocating for parks projects at $175,000. Again, in terms of the fire assistance to firefighters grant match, that's that $45,000. Under that is the police radar that we've mentioned earlier. And lastly, the sidewalk, curb and gutter repair. So net expenditures and revenues, we're showing a surplus of $756,000, which would just be in addition to our existing fund balance reserve. Of this amount, we set aside $100,000 every year for any unknowns in terms of any bid overruns for projects, any priority projects that the council may consider in the future. And here in blue again is the parking lot rehab set aside for the city's parking lot behind the Hotel Woodland. What you'll notice—
You say side, but isn't it a total cost for the project?
Is the $575,000 a total cost? That's the question. That is the anticipated cost. It could be less, it could be more. I think as we get closer and we start designing the project, I think we'll have better information.
Thank you.
That is the estimated cost right now. You will notice that at the end of at the end of fiscal year 21-22, there is a fund balance, anticipated fund balance of $2 million. We basically like to keep a certain amount of fund balance, again, for project overruns, bids that come in over projected cost for projects, or any unanticipated cost that was not foreseen the year before or the year in planning. Over the life of the Measure F spending plan, we do anticipate that we'll have about $22 million. I'm sorry, that we'll have about $12 million in fund balance, but this could be slowly carved away by city council priority projects, cost overruns on projects, or any other anticipated costs that we haven't planned out yet. And this is, I guess, an opportunity for city council to look at fund balance and determine what priorities it has in mind and what type of projects they would like to see funded in the future as well.
I'll just add to that. So in response to Mayor Stollard's comment earlier around, what is our strategy to fund some of our critical infrastructure, as well as desired new project amenities, whether it be the pool or other things. So you'll start to see the Measure E spending plan had a fair amount of loan repayment that we anticipate over the coming years should development continue at its current pace. So we've got, just shy of 10 million in Measure E. We've got, some flexibility shown through the balance of Measure F here. So we believe there's some flexibility to start to ask the council to give direction on how do we want to prioritize using this flexibility towards advancing, both our infrastructure, whether it be roadways or other facilities that are not adequately funded to maintain the appropriate service levels, but also give careful consideration to building new facilities such as the pool. With that, this is where over the course of the next year, we'll be working with the council and the subcommittees to identify how to prioritize and build an appropriate spending plan to use this flexibility that we have in these two funding sources.
I'd be happy if you said over the coming months rather than the coming years, Ken.
Well,
I just feel like it's been so long.
I hear you. And these conversations will certainly start in the next month or two, but over the course of the year, right, there's a lot of information that we're going to have to work through. And as part of the next year's budget, it's our plan to have all of these funding strategies outlined for the council, so you can see how roadway maintenance aligns with pool maintenance, with aligning with future fire station relocation. So there's a lot of moving parts. We also have a lot of external factors, whether it be cost increases that we project due to inflation or the construction market, but we also have opportunities for other federal and state funding that I believe are going to materialize over the course of the next year. So I think we want to be, thoughtful and deliberate, moving the ball forward, with good intention, but at the same time, making sure that we're doing so in context of all the other priorities and opportunities to fund these projects.
All right. Is that the end of the discussion on the Measure F spending plan?
I have a question, Mayor Stallard. This is Councilmember.
I'm getting ready to call for council discussion, so please proceed.
Sorry. Just wanted to clarify the $575,000 that's being held in reserve for the Hotel Woodland parking lot. When's the projected date to use those funds? I know that Mayor Stallard mentioned holding monies in reserve, and earlier where we have the 1 million being held for the fire department. Is there a projected date on that 575,000 or $500,000?
Yeah, it's, our intent over this year, if that money gets allocated into the set aside, we'll do some more due diligence on the scope of the project at hand to upgrade that parking lot. And we have, multiple city-owned parking lots throughout downtown that have no identified funding source for future, repair and replacement of them. And they continue to, show signs of degradation. So this is our attempt to say, let's, start to tackle probably the largest public parking lot in downtown, put together a plan to replace that with the goal to ultimately kind of rotate through all the lots downtown and get them upgraded. So should this allocation be set aside, we'll advance in more detail what the scope of the project will be. We'll come back to the council with a specific design for the improvements and authorization to go to bid, which will then inform if the 575 is going to be enough to fund the full project. We're also being very cautious, again, to set this money aside, and going to be tracking very closely how bids come back on our projects, as we anticipate bid costs will continue to escalate significantly over the course of the next 6 to 12 months as the economy picks back up and demand for materials and resources and supply chains are stressed and inflation kicks in. So we want to be cautious not to move forward and prioritize the project in a very expensive bidding climate. So those are all factors, but if everything aligns and the allocation that we've received is sufficient to cover the project cost, given our estimates for work, we could see this project go to construction as part of the 22 construction season.
Did that answer the question?
Thank you. Yes, you did. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fernandez. Any additional questions from the council? Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public wishing to comment on this item?
No.
Item 17. Council, what is your pleasure?
Mayor Seller, I can move to adopt.
Thank you. There's a motion by the Mayor Pro Tem to adopt the Measure F spending plan as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mayor.
Thank you. Seconded by Council Member Garcia Cadena. All right, further discussion? We verified that there's no public comment, so let's have the clerk call the roll, please.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Vega.
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg.
Aye.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abe. This concludes item 17. So our penultimate item, item 18, is the approval of the Measure J spending plan. So please proceed, Avis.
Sure, Measure J. So Measure J continues baseline funding support to Measure J programs consistent with voter-approved advisory measures, which include youth recreation programming, literacy programs, youth at risk potential, school resource officer, and crime prevention, and lastly, utility ratepayer assistance program. Measure J in FY fiscal year 21/22 allocates funding to the Community College Promise program. It's a 2-year commitment and one-time funding for the Woodland Girls Fast Pitch program as well. And again, this is to pay for field reservation and the porta potty. The Measure J also increases funding to existing programs and aquatics. It will fund a temporary pool maintenance staffing position. And for the Library Square One, it reclassifies a current position there as well. Moving on to the plan, the fiscal plan. This is what the plan would look like. This one did fit on one sheet, but I'm hoping everybody can see it okay. Measure J is a 8-year tax measure, which concludes in fiscal year 22-23. So we're about a year away from that at the beginning of FY 21-22. However, in green, you will see that we're expected to receive about $3.3 million in revenue. And in terms of expenses, we're looking to spend $250,000 in ratepayer assistance, $510,000 for general recreation program, $234,000 for the middle school programs, $273,000 for the aquatics program, $126,000 for the recreation van, $165,000 for summer camp, $5,000 for the youth advisory program, $573,000 for that potential at-risk youth program, $121,000 for our crime prevention program, $95,000 for our GREAT program, which serves 4th and 7th grades, and $643,000 for the library. So total programming is about $2.9 million unallocated, which means we kind of set aside for future program needs is $157,000. So total expenditures for fiscal year 22 is $3.1 million. Of the revenue that is being expected for FY 21/22, we're recommending $16,000 as an ongoing expense for the aquatics program to assist with pool maintenance. We're proposing $8,000 for the Woodland Girls Fast Pitch as a one-time cost, and the community college program, promise program at $100,000 for 2 years. Lastly, the Library Square One position reclassification at $12,000, and this is an ongoing expense. So you'll notice at the end of fiscal year 21/22, our fund balance is expected to be $1.3 million. And in the final year, we're expecting that fund balance to grow to about $1.4 million. You'll also notice that in FY 22/23, we are programming for only a quarter of the expenses, with Measure R picking up 3/4 of the remaining of the expenses. And so again, this is an opportunity for city council to look at fund balance and start thinking of priority projects.
Thank you. Does that conclude the presentation on Measure J?
It does, yes.
The only comment I would offer is that some of these programs have been in place for many years, and I think it's probably time to review them and rethink them and determine whether that there are things we should continue or whether we should shift money to perhaps some new things. So that would be my recommendation to staff. Colleagues, do you have questions or comments?
Mayor Stallard, I do.
And so do I after Mayor
Okay.
Pro Tem.
Myra, please proceed.
Thank you. So, Evis, I noticed that the utility assistance program, that line item has increased really modestly, and I'm thinking that maybe the need has increased just as I think about the community as it is maturing and folks may find themselves in need for utility assistance. You know, I would like to understand if we're currently measuring like what the gap is, how many applicants submit applications and how many we turn away essentially. Is that something that we track and is easily available?
Yes, we can gather that information for you. I will tell you that this is a very popular program. The need is there. You do have to be low income to qualify for the program. And I can also tell you that within the first months of every fiscal year, we run out of money. So it is a community need. And we're hoping with the new American Rescue Plan that we can augment or supplement the funding.
Yeah, thank you for that. I also want to echo Mayor Stallard's comment around just these programs. I see that many of them have a long-standing legacy of being in place in our community. While I don't have to remind everybody that, gosh, our whole world got turned upside down. So just in the services that the families in our community need, I mean, from the recreation van to summer camp, you know, we're seeing the workday has expanded. So just want to continue to encourage staff to really look at the dynamics of the families, the youth in our community, really ensure that we're deploying our assets and that our delivery system to serve all these community needs are relevant and are timely changing.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Vega. Any additional comments or thoughts for the staff?
Yes, Mr. Mayor Stallard, I have a question.
Please.
The advisory for the library is 20%. And in 2021, we looks like we allocated $796,000. And in 21-22, it's down $150,000. Can you explain the $150,000 difference, please?
Yes, so for instance, this year we did allocate some facility improvement funding for the library. There were some projects that were being carried out, such as carpet replacement and other facility improvements throughout the library. So that would explain some of the increase or decrease that you're noticing.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I might mention I was in the library recently and they've done a number of upgrades. They used the COVID downtime to do a lot of physical rehabilitation, which was really needed. Congratulations to the staff for getting that done. Any additional council comment?
I have a question.
Please proceed.
Mayor. Actually, I have two questions. The middle school program, how many students does that serve? How many students are actually served on a regular basis through the middle school program?
I don't have that number with me, but I can certainly get back to you. We did prepare a statistical information sheet that I don't have in front of me, but I can certainly email that to you all and or share those numbers with you.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question was, I know that I thought I had read that with the GREAT program that due to the hybrid education we've been doing right now, that the 7th grade GREAT program didn't take place. So what happens to those funds? Do they get reallocated from last year, from fiscal year 2021? Or were those funds used to serve the 4th graders?
So whatever funding does not get used does go to fund balance at the end of the fiscal year. So what you're seeing in FY 20 and 21 are
Mhm.
budgeted numbers,
Okay.
not actual. So at the end of the year, we'll just see what we do expect savings in all these and a lot of these programs due to the COVID pandemic, and so that all that funding will just kind of revert back to fund balance.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Fernandez has a question.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor Stallard. I just want to thank my colleagues for bringing some questions that I also had. And I would like to keep in mind the implications of COVID. And looking at the middle school program, I have a question regarding the high school. Is there a reason why we haven't or can we support high school programs? I know that they currently have 2 after-school programs that is helping students deal with the situation of COVID, and it allows them to socialize after school. And I know that they mentioned that they run off of grant funding, and we're looking for a more consistent support system, financial support system. So they have POP, I think, at Pioneer High School, and they have, I think it's La Semilla at Woodland High School. And just wondering if there is a possibility to provide a more stable funding source for those programs, or is there a reason why we only went for middle school programs?
To answer your question in terms of why we're only funding middle schools, I think at the implementation of the Measure J spending plan, it was decided council developed a framework with the assistance of staff. And so high schools was not one of the items that was focused on. It was mostly the middle school. But certainly in the future, I think it is one of those possible areas that we can look at funding with the continuation of Measure A going into Measure R.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions, colleagues?
Well, actually, while I have the mic on, could I ask also the allocation on the southeast area pool?
Yes, so that was back in fiscal year 2018, 2019, we did reserve out of Measure J $1 million, of which 250,000 went towards the lease of the land next to Pioneer High School, which leaves intact $750,000 for a future pool, and so that reserve remains intact.
Okay. No, I just wondered, is there a reason why, well, obviously that was for a designated cost, but is there a reason why it hasn't continued to I guess, gain a reserve?
I believe it just hasn't come to focus again in terms of allocating an additional reserve, but it doesn't preclude us from identifying it as an area that we should be reserving to.
Okay, thank you.
I certainly concur with Councilmember Fernandez's concern there. You know, we've got to get on with that.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, before we move on, I just a couple sort of follow-up remarks and responses. First of all, appreciate the council's questions around, right? Obviously, the world has changed substantially over the last few years, and our youth and our community have been through a lot, and we're going to be rethinking what their needs are and how to best serve them moving forward. As part of the council's retreat, there was a common theme and a specific council priority goal and action for us to evaluate all of our programs that we provide to the community, particularly targeting our programs for youth. So over the course of the next several months, we'll be working with staff to really evaluate how these programs are reaching our community and making sure they're reaching those in most need, as well as making sure we're reaching all aspects of the community, and come back over the course of this year. If you recall, in December, we provide an annual report on how the funding is being spent that articulates very clearly, how different individuals are being served by program and type. So I think we'll use that point in December to ask the council moving forward. And as we build, future spending plans and programs, how do we want to begin to, rethink where these dollars are invested and expand potentially some of the programs as well. So, to the point of, high school, certainly I would offer that, that population group is on the table. We do have the youth master plan, which is underway as well. And hopefully we'll gain some good insights out of the youth master plan as to where there are gaps in services being provided in the community. So that will be another important input towards where to take some of the Measure J spending moving forward. And then relative to the pool, the reserve, so the council did take action several years ago to sort of seed fund that reserve fund balance. And with Measure J sunsetting and not knowing where I think Measure R was going to land with the voters, we kind of took a pause for a minute to see where that future sales tax funding stream would position us in the future. And now that the voters have given us another 12 years of flexibility with that quarter-cent sales tax, it's time for us to come back as part of this conversation around our capital needs, our infrastructure needs, and put together a very thoughtful and coordinated investment plan across all of these measures, as well as our general fund balance. So this all ties into the comment earlier around, it's a good time for us. I think we're stabilized coming out of, a very uncertain fiscal time. And an opportunity for us to really double down with the council and start to answer some of these questions. Mr. Mayor, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Once again, in fiscal year 18-19, we put in $1 million, which set, 750,000 is showing here. I thought it was $1 million. We spent some, I gather. That's why it's showing at 750. 1920, we put in 500,000. I understand the pause in 2021, but the council at the retreat, I thought, made it clear that the pool was a priority, and you're showing nothing for 21-22. So I'm asking you, can you find some money to add to this fund for 21-22?
Yeah, as you can see, the fund balance at the end of 21-22, as outlined here, with the one-time and recurring costs, does have some flexibility, 1.3 million in it. So should it be the council's desire, we could again set aside, another $500,000 towards the pool project. But it still begs the question, right? What is the full expenditure plan to get that pool built? So it'll get us a little bit closer, but I'm more interested in what is the overall funding strategy across all funds to get the pool built, get the fire station positioned for future relocation, and then help supplement our roadway improvement program.
I think we're probably all in agreement about that, but this one has sat for too long. It needs to get a little extra attention. I would respectfully ask that you fast track figuring out what it is we want to do, what it's going to cost, and how we're going to get it done, and that we would hear back from you as soon as you're able to do it. Okay? Because I'm feeling like I'm not doing my job. I've been here since 2011. We've needed it since 2011. It's got to get done. Yeah. And I have no other way to do than be out front about it. I don't want to wait anymore. I want to figure this out. We've been through recession. We've been through good times, bad times. We've got inflation. It's always going to be a problem. We've got to figure out how to do this. Our city to the south of us has 5 public pools for only 10,000 more people, and we've got 1. I feel like it's time for us to get really serious about this. So I'm emphatic because I feel like we've waited and waited, and this particular need in our community should be addressed. We have other fish to fry, and I feel like we're just building up a list of more capital projects with more costs, and this thing will just trail if we don't decide we're going to get it done. Okay? Colleagues, any more questions on this? Okay, well, I know I've been the skunk at the garden party, but the fact of the matter is I've been here 11 years. The voters shouldn't give me any more trust those who feel that this should be done if I can't get this done. Our city has the capacity, we need to have the will. So that's my message. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment?
No, no public comment.
Thank you. Colleagues, any more questions? Well, we've got a spending plan before us. The manager says he can put 500,000 more in 21-22 for the pool. That's, to me, not enough, but it's better than nothing. I'd entertain a motion that we proceed with the spending plan with another 500,000 in the pool reserve. Or whatever.
I'll make the motion with the caveat that the city manager will find $500,000 if we have to take it from somewhere else. I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, I'm not going to leave my city council position until that pool gets done. I let the prior city manager know that, and I let the present city manager know that. I'm not going to leave until that pool's done. So whatever it takes to get it funded, let's get it done. I agree with you. I think we have the wherewithal and the talent and the funding mechanisms, including we can look at some ARP money, some other money, some grant money. We'll get it done. But the question is priority, and I agree with you on that. And I know that we can move some X's and O's around to get it done in the next couple of years. Thank you. And with that, I'll make the motion.
Okay. Motion by Councilmember Landsberg to adopt the Measure J spending plan with an additional 500,000 reallocated to the Southeast Pool Reserve. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second Mayor Steller.
Mayor Pro Tem Vega seconds the motion. Further discussion? I believe I asked if there was public comment and heard that there was none. Was that correct?
Correct. No public comment.
All right, thank you. Please call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Vega,
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena,
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg,
Aye.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, upon request of colleagues and my own desire, we're going to have a 5-minute recess. We'll reconvene at just about 8 o'clock. We'll take a little recess. Thank you. Avis, while we're waiting to reconvene, I want to also join with my colleagues in congratulating you on your promotion and commend you on a very clear presentation of a lot of material. Thank you so much.
Thank you, I really appreciate that. You want me to continue? Are you guys ready?
Yes, I see all five of us are here. Let us proceed, please. Thank you.
Next, in terms of the presentation, is the FY fiscal year 21/22 proposed budget capital improvement program. We'll start off with project highlights because I'm sure that's what everybody wants to see in terms of what we're funding. So in terms of water and sewer, what we're proposing is a water sewer repair and replacement that's going to happen along Pennegaston College. We're going to propose a large diameter wastewater pipeline repair and replacement and lining, groundwater monitoring wells, water pollution asset replacement project, annual sewer repair and replacement, and lastly, replacement of Orangeburg sewer laterals. In terms of transportation, we're looking at Sports Park Drive pedestrian overcrossing, Matmore Road and East Gum Avenue rehabilitation, Gibson Road bicycle pedestrian mobility project, that's from East to West Street, and the program year 2021 road maintenance. In terms of the Spring Lake infrastructure fees, which we refer to many times as SLIF, we're looking at the Highway 113 County Road 25A interchange modifications, that's phase 1, and Gibson Road interchange modifications. So those are the major projects that we've decided to highlight. There are other smaller projects on the CIP program list that we are not mentioning here, but we decided that just to mention the bigger projects here. As we move on to the, I guess before I move on, does anybody have any questions?
I do have a question. I did not see any more financial information on our agenda tonight. Is this going back to item 15, the proposed budget? It's not showing capital improvement program on the agenda.
Yes. So what you'll notice on the staff report is basically a summary in terms of a $19 million plan. But I have in the additional slides that I'm going to be presenting to you, you'll get a summary by category and by fund of what those projects are. And then in the June presentation of the overall budget for FY21 fiscal year 21/22, you will get a project listing along with project descriptions and sheets.
That's all fine. What I'm trying to determine is where does this fit in on the agenda? Is this part of the presentation of the proposed budget, item 15?
Correct. Yes, it is.
Okay, so we're returning to item 15 to finish the item. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question, but yes, that is correct.
Okay.
So the next slide will show the capital improvement program summary by category. You'll see that we will have the major categories listed on the very left from fire all the way to water. Of these categories in fiscal year 21/22, the major highlights are the transportation program, which will be funded at $8.8 million, followed by water enterprise at $6.1 million, and sewer at $3.0 million. And lastly, the largest, biggest one is the SLIF, or Spring Lake infrastructure fee projects at $855,000. And again, like I mentioned earlier, we do a 5-year outlook on this, starting with the current funding year, which is FY 2021, going out to fiscal year 24/25. I'll move on to the next slide, which is the same capital improvement program, but this time we're showing project funding by fund. So here, I'll point out that the two major funds that are contributing to this capital improvement program are the water and sewer enterprise at $4.8 and $4.3 million. Next, you'll see that Measure F is contributing $2.5 million for the Measure F spending plan, followed by Measure E at $1.5 million. Also, we have the Capital Projects Fund, which is funding projects at $2 million. And lastly, you'll notice here it says Fund 361. That's the Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Act funding at a cost of $1.7 million. Again, for a total cost of $19 million for the total capital improvement program for fiscal year 21/22.
If I could offer what I believe it to be a constructive comment,
Sure.
You should avoid acronyms.
You're right.
Just write road maintenance so that people looking at our budget understand that's a big item at 1.8 million, okay?
Yes.
1.7 million, excuse me.
And so that does conclude the capital improvement program presentation. Do you guys have any other questions regarding funding of our capital improvement program?
Colleagues?
Mayor Sellard, I have a question.
Please.
Okay, thank you. So I was on the Spring Lake Infrastructure Fund. So are all of those funds that are outlined there, those are all funded by the Melrose fees that are being collected from the homeowners? Is that correct?
No, so the funding for these projects come as a result of permits that are being pulled for homes. These are paid from out of what we call SLIF credits that developers do receive when they build infrastructure. They are paid derived from bond funding to pay for this infrastructure.
Okay, so then the Melrose taxes are covering something other than what you've outlined there? Or
well, I guess to answer your question in the roundabout way, yes, eventually these bond costs do become Melrose costs and do get assigned to the property owners. But initially, what we do reimburse developers for construction of all this infrastructure through bond proceeds.
Okay, this is a topic that frequently comes up with the residents of Spring Lake, just questions around the Melrose and what they cover. And I appreciate you and Kim and Ken as these questions have come up, but it's a little confusing, right? Especially as I see them outlined. So I just want to continue to encourage, residents who are interested in getting specific information on Melrose to approach you all, and thank you for taking time to address this very complicated but very costly item for Spring Lake residents. And that's it, Evis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Myra. Anyone else have a question at this point?
Yes. Evis, can you go back to the slide that shows the $2.6 million for homeless housing? What does that mean? Well, that's for 2021. Mm-hmm. And we have nothing for 21-22. That's my question.
Right. So homeless housing, we've identified project expenses to build the housing project along East Beamer and Road 102. And so at the moment, we're not anticipating additional funding being needed in fiscal year 21-22 to complete the project.
Yeah, Rich, the 2.6 million was the allocation to help the city's contribution towards the shelter, plus significant contribution towards the infrastructure for the permanent supportive housing units, which council awarded that contract, I want to say about a month and a half ago, and that construction will initiate this year. So that money's reflected in the current year budget, but much of that work will actually happen in the next fiscal year.
All right, that was my question, Ken, is regarding the funding to get the 61 affordable units up and running. So we've already budgeted that money last year, but we're spending it this year. That's what you're saying, right?
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Rich. Anyone else have a question on the capital improvement program summary? Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on this?
No.
Okay, this is not an action item either. So are you concluded, Avis, or is there more?
Concludes my presentation. Next, we will move on to the American Rescue Plan, which Ken will present.
All right. And again, thank you for your work presenting tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Evis and council. So we'll take comments, feedback on both the capital program spending plan as well as the budget. Come back to the council on June 15th with a final budget for council adoption. So appreciate feedback and input. Please, between now and say a week before the June 15th meeting, if you have any questions that you hear from constituents in your districts or you have yourselves, please reach out and we'll be happy to answer those and build those answers into the final presentation. So real quickly, last sort of important piece of our sort of fiscal situation is, of course, the American Rescue Plan. We have now had a final determination that our allocation from the ARP dollars will yield $11.1 million to the city. This is one-time funding that will be distributed in two allocations, $5.5 million this year, we hope within the next few days. Then the second allocation will be distributed next May.
Ken, the original indication from the congressman was it would be 13 million. What happened to the rest of it?
Well, my understanding was those were preliminary numbers, and Department of Treasury in their final calculations sort of fine-tuned all those. So our final indicated amount from the Department of Treasury was 11.1 million that we're eligible for. So yeah, not quite the full amount that we were hoping, but certainly money that we weren't necessarily counting on. But again, this is one-time funding. We will have essentially 3 years to expend the funds to the end of December 2024. The guidance that was released recently, as I mentioned before, we are carefully reviewing and attending webinars held by the League and others to help inform how we want to move forward with a spending framework for these dollars. Quick reminder, included in the updated guidance, so there's at least 3 key categories. So the ARP guidance does allow for cities to essentially recover unrealized revenues that we were projecting had there not been a pandemic. So instead of simply comparing to what we anticipated in terms of revenues from sales tax, property tax, even rec program fee revenue, instead of just comparing where we ended up in 2020 to 2019, we can actually identify what we projected to receive in those revenue categories and allocate the ARP dollars to offset those unrealized revenues. That creates a situation where we have much more flexibility to use those dollars. And so Evis and Kim are thoughtfully going through the comparison and the analysis that ultimately we'll have to present to the Department of Treasury to substantiate our revenue loss. But it'll be in the several millions of dollars. I believe that will be available for us on a fairly flexible allocation. We also include in the guidance, business assistance, economic recovery, and funding programs towards those that were most impacted, whether it be mentally, economically, or socially due to the pandemic. So we're carefully reviewing a very significant amount of guidance around specifically how those dollars can be invested towards those programs, but there appears to be a fair amount of flexibility, but there will be a lot of accountability and reporting necessary for those programs. And then lastly, infrastructure was a key theme. So water, sewer, storm, and broadband infrastructure specifically are identified as eligible funding opportunities for local jurisdictions to put towards. So we'll be reviewing all of this, convening our subcommittee of the council next week to begin to frame what a spending plan might look like over the next 3 years. I want to have a discussion around community engagement and potential collaboration and partnerships with our local partners here in the community as well. So more to follow. This is going to track a little bit behind our budget process, and it can be independent of that. But again, we want to be thoughtful about how we invest these dollars, make sure we're putting it towards the best use. Largely going to be recommending that these go towards one-time expenditures and not allocated towards ongoing expenditures since these are one-time dollars. So anticipate maybe in a July timeframe being back to the council with a preliminary spending plan for these funds and the public input process. So that concludes any comments or questions on ARP before we move to a final budget wrap up.
Colleagues?
Fernandez has a
Councilmember Fernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Stallard. We have the first installment coming in May of 5.5. The second installment is at December.
No, the second installment scheduled to arrive next May, so 12 months after.
Additional questions?
I have not a question, but a comment or request.
Yes, sir.
And this is probably for the city manager. Those 3 topics, revenue recovery, business assistance, and infrastructure, I'm assuming each one of those is probably 75 pages describing what those 3 things mean. I wonder if you could share that with council members, not today, but in the next, whenever you get the information, so we have an idea what those 3 topics really mean.
Certainly, yeah, we'll make sure each of the council member gets a copy of the guidance that's been provided.
Okay. I suspect too there will be a lot of commentary available from our council, and I know other law firms that represent cities put things out as well. So we can we're starting to get some good summaries provided by our federal lobbyist as well as the league that we can also share as those come in. Thank you, Ken. Is that the conclusion of the American Rescue Plan?
That concludes our remarks on that. So we can move on to final budget recap. So some key themes that you've heard this evening. We're in a very fortunate position and a different position, I think, than we were at a year ago relative to where we're at with the budget. So we have a fair amount of flexibility, I think, at our disposal, but at the same time, as the 5-year forecast identifies, our looming structural deficit is something we always need to be mindful of as our PERS costs continue to outpace our revenues. So as we consider, thoughtful one-time as well as ongoing expenditures, we need to be mindful of our increasing pension costs moving forward. So we will be coming back as part of the next budget year as well with a recommendation to have the council consider supplemental contribution to PERS like you did several years ago, which allows us to sort of advance fund, super fund our PERS obligations, and in return yield ongoing annual savings. And so that will be an important part of our recommendations over the course of the next year as to how to allocate some of the budget flexibility. Also want to, acknowledge that, the council's strategic goals and priorities this year have influenced what we've outlined for you this evening. However, I do want to say that it doesn't encapsulate the entirety of the key priority actions that are identified in the council's goals. And specifically want to highlight a couple things. So sustainability was an important topic, as well as equity, diversity, inclusion, as well as engaging and activating our volunteer community. here and people that want to engage and assist in helping Woodland become stronger. And so those are going to be ongoing important focuses as we move forward, and we'll be bringing back throughout the year specific additional recommendations to fund advancing those key council priorities. So if you don't see them showing up here, that doesn't mean that we aren't going to be working on those and bringing back spending recommendations. And so again, that's another area where the flexibility that we have in unreserved fund balance will allow us the ability to advance those important council priorities. So with that, I'll conclude budget presentation and again, remind you that our schedule moving forward to final adoption looks like this. Tonight, preliminary budget recommendations, the spending plans have now been accepted by the council, and we'll build those into the final budget recommendations. Unless the council feels compelled to come back at the June 1st meeting and have additional discussion around certain topics on the budget, we will plan and work with finance team to come back on the 15th with a final budget package for council adoption. So that concludes the presentation. I'll give it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
And thank you, Mr. City Manager and your team for all the work done on this budget tonight. Colleagues, any questions or comments as we conclude the budget discussion?
Mayor Sellard, I have a comment.
Please proceed.
So thank you. So City Manager, I'm glad you brought up the strategic plan. I think we took a lot of time as council to really identify the key priorities. And the spirit of this strategic plan is to really guide the way we're going to invest our resources, capital, human capital, and otherwise. So just reflecting on tonight's meeting and the discussions, the pool was identified as a priority. So I'm confident that this council put forward a strategic plan that addresses some key areas that are going to really advance our community and address some of the not so good issues that we've seen most recently. So I look forward to having conversations and tracking on the progress of those strategic plan priorities and having some proposed funding plans to support those. So that'll be all, Mayor Sellard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Vega. Other colleagues have comments or concluding remarks? Councilmember Fernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Sellard. Again, I want to thank our Mayor Pro Tem, Myra Vega, for bringing up those issues. And also I'd like to thank our staff and Ken for the thorough work and your presentation on the budget. Not an area that some of us want to sit through and endure, but thank you for the thorough explanations, Mr. Morales, on the budget. And thank you, Mayor, City Manager Ken Hyatt, for your work on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? And I presume we have no public comment to conclude at the end of the meeting. I see the clerk saying no. All right. If that's the case, we'll proceed to adjournment. I want to mention that the manager and I were discussing the possibility of returning to live council meetings as of June 15th, but it will be a Zoom option. So be thinking about that, members of the council, should you wish to join me at the council chambers, or if you wish to remain part of the meeting by Zoom, but that's still a month off. Okay, and
Mayor, if I may interject, we do have one more item on reports to City Manager.
Oh, excuse me, isn't that funny? I'm sorry, I just a little mental blank there. Obviously, the item 19, the ordinance and resolution relating to appointment, removal, and duties of the mayor and mayor pro tem. Sorry, I must have blanked that out. I know that's an important issue. So please present your report on that.
Great. So real quick, this item is bringing back to the council a discussion regarding the rotation of the mayor and mayor pro tem. This was initiated back in December when the council was faced with significant turnover on council and some vacancies resulting from the District 3 transition of Councilmember Barajas to supervisor. So the council at the time was faced with a decision around how to fill the pending vacancy of what would normally be the mayor pro tem in District 3. So at the time, in December, the council had a couple motions considered to continue with resetting the rotation with then Mayor Landsberg continuing for another term, or and Vice Mayor Stoller continuing. Alternatively, and ultimately prevailing was an alternative to have Mayor Stoller continue to move into the mayor term, and then to fill the vacancy of the District 3, voted to have Mayor Pro Tem Vega, District 5, fill that seat. And so what that did was raise the question around the rotation moving forward. And with the council's transition to districts, previously the intention in the ordinance was that the council would make the appointments after the election, in this case in 2020, and have that rotation continue to move through the districts. It wasn't real clear whether that was intended to be directly sequential, but that was the intention that the council, I think, had at the time. Ultimately, it does create scenarios where there will be a council member that's asked to serve in an initial term of their district, or alternatively, we'll have a rotation where a council member won't have the privilege of being able to serve as a mayor during their 4-year appointment. So what ultimately we're recommending the council consider and before you this evening is an amendment to the ordinance to help clarify what I believe the intent of the council was, which was to offer each council member an opportunity and privilege to serve as mayor during their 4-year term, and make that added language sort of built into the ordinance. And so the amended ordinance language addresses that this evening, and specifically says that it is the council's intent to have each council member have that privilege to the maximum extent possible. Again, acknowledging that there are 5 districts and a 4-year rotation typically. So to address the issue moving forward, that we are now sort of out of that normal sequential order, there is a recommendation to adopt concurrently a resolution that would set a new rotation moving forward. That's also attached to your staff report, that would move through the districts in a manner over the course of the next 10 years that would avoid the scenario where a council member would not have the privilege during their 4-year term to serve as mayor, and also would not result in a scenario where a potentially newly elected council member would be asked to serve as mayor during their initial term. So before you this evening are amendments to the ordinance, as well as a council rotation that matches what we have right now, which is District 2 serving as mayor, District 5 as mayor pro tem, and then rotating District 4, 3, 1, and then resetting for the next 5 years through that rotation. So not a direct sequential order, but closely mirroring that, but again, at the same time, allowing us to avoid a potential scenario where a council member does not have the privilege to serve or will be asked to serve during their initial term as a council member. So with that, I'll conclude the presentation, ask the council to discuss it amongst themselves and consider adopting the staff's recommendation this evening to amend the ordinance to clarify the council's intent, and then adopt a resolution setting a rotation for the next 10 years.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. You've seen the staff report and heard the presentation. Discussion, who would like to go first? Councilmember Fernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Stallard, and thank you, City Manager Ken Hyatt. Thank you for your overview of the projected proposal. I think it provides an equitable process so that every council member has the opportunity to serve on the council. And I believe that the intentions of the districts were for equity and representation of all 5 districts. So I thank you for the proposed rotational system that would allow each of the council members an opportunity to serve the residents of Woodland as mayor. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fernandez. Anyone else wish to speak?
That sounded like a motion, so I'll second it.
All right. We have a motion by Councilmember Fernandez, seconded by Landsberg.
No.
Well, we are going. You're not seconding?
I'll second, but Fernandez.
Yeah, we'll have further discussion. I would just like to mention that at the City of Davis, the current practice is to move people into the rotation who have been on the council the longest but haven't yet served as mayor, which is another way you could look at the same language we're considering tonight. In other words, who's been around long enough so ought to have a turn. And then, of course, we had 2 people elected the same night, but we'll work through all those things just through collegiality, I hope. So anyone else wish to comment on the motion? Is there a member of the, oh yes, Councilmember Pro Tem Vega.
Yeah, I was just gonna call out, echo Councilwoman Fernandez just around the language included in here that just provides equitable, and the rotation really, I think really encompasses the spirit of the district. So when we're ready, I'd like to make a motion, unless.
Well, actually we do.
That's right, sorry.
That's all right. I forgot the whole item. So anyway, we have the motion by Councilmember Fernandez. We have the second by Councilmember Landsberg. I think I should ask for public comment. Madam Clerk, has anyone expressed a desire to be heard on this issue?
No.
All right. Now, any additional discussion before we proceed to a roll call on this? And I too want to thank the manager. This was a thorny issue, and it required a lot of thought and sketched out several scenarios to find something that hopefully would address the issue, which I think he has done. So with that, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Vega.
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg.
Aye.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Motion carried. And I now think we are at the end of the meeting, and you've already heard my announcement about potentially resuming live meetings on June 15th. But I would like to conclude our meeting tonight by remembering a long-serving librarian at the City of Woodland, Marie Bryant, who passed away recently. So with that, we'll conclude our meeting, and we'll see you at the first Tuesday in June. We are adjourned. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.